This is the Plant Yourself Podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of plantyourself.com and the Big Change Program with Josh Lajani. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live a wholesome and holy life. Hey, today's podcast is a double feature. It's actually twice as long as typical podcasts, so I'll keep the pre-show announcements really short. First of all, you can still get the Stop Self-Sabotage report at plantyourself.com/sabotage. Second of all, thank you so much to the folks who stepped up to become patrons of the show. I'm now up to $330 a month, which is almost one-third of the way to my first stretch goal. So thank you all so much. Third thing, Big Change Program restarts in September. So if you're not on the mailing list, then go to bigchangeprogram.com and you can sign up on the mailing list. I think I may even have signups up already. I'm not quite ready for you, so we'll have to noodle things around a little bit. But if you're really eager and you want to get in before I close the doors, you can do that. And otherwise, let's get to today's show. So my guest is Tara Kemp. I met Tara at Plantstock last year and a couple of years ago, and I was just immediately struck by what a happy, warm, friendly, persuasive person she is. Not by saying anything, not by lecturing, by haranguing, by quoting statistics, but just her life itself and her energy and her demeanor and her glow. All just like you look at her and you go, well, whatever she's doing, I want to do the same thing. So she's one of the great luminaries and ambassadors of the plant-based movement. She's been involved in Plantstock. She's been involved in Forks Over Knives. She has a plan to take over the world as a dietitian. And I thought we would just have a fun conversation, but it turned really deep and actually for the first half kind of dark. And so what came to me through this conversation was the way in which we can go through our journeys and use all of the trials and all of the suffering to make us stronger, to make us better, to make us more self-loving and in more service to others. So that's kind of giving the whole plot away. I hope you'll stay with us for the whole thing, and I'll see you again on the other side. So without further ado, Tara Kemp, welcome to the Plant Yourself Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I think we scheduled this more or less. We tried to schedule it like starting almost a year ago.
I know.
We met at Plantstock, so for various reasons, it didn't happen until now. And so I have to believe the universe has kind of teed us off to have a really interesting discussion. And just, but as we were talking before I hit the record, we kind of went over like what the topics would be. And said, well, why don't we'll begin with me asking you like what you're up to right now. And your answer was, well, I'm really up in the air. So why don't we, where were you when I thought I was going to ask you that question, and what's happened since?
Yeah, so basically, so for the past year, I've been working part-time and taking classes part-time. And the classes that I've been taking have been preparing me for starting a graduate program at Loma Linda University, a Master's in Public Health coordinated registered dietitian program. And basically at this point, I have about 2 months until my classes all need to be finished. And I am just coming to the realization within the past month that I probably should have, I guess, these classes are a completely different rigor than I'm used to. Things like English and writing and discussion-based classes come really easily to me, and that's the bulk of what I did in my undergraduate degree. So I worked very hard for the grades that I got, but it was a different kind of working hard. It was a lot of things that I naturally enjoyed or had like some level of skill with, and things like organic chemistry did not come easily to me, and I'm finding that I have to spend a lot more time on the classes and with the material, and there's this whole leap of like just not even understanding what I'm even looking at and like really needing to sit and work with it for a very long time. So I recently quit my jobs that I was doing, and I'm a full-time student right now for the summer. But whether or not I will actually start my graduate program in the fall, or whether I will have to delay the start a little bit, either 6 months or a year, just depending on talking through what they think is best in terms of best start times for this program. So we'll see if I actually start my program in the fall.
Okay. I feel like I should get you off this podcast so you can go hit the books.
Yeah, don't worry, I've been very, very diligent on my studying, and a little break like this feels good. But yeah, so anyways, we'll see what happens with that, and thankfully, I do feel like if I do have to delay my start a year, as unfortunate as that would be, I also think that I'll be able to fill that time with valuable work, still make a contribution to this movement in the field of plant-based nutrition, and definitely continue to learn and grow in ways that will only serve me even more once I'm in school or working as a dietitian. So I have this sense of peace that it's all going to be okay, but my current, what I'm going to be doing in 3 months from now is a little more up in the air than if we had talked like 2 months ago.
Gotcha. Well, there's a whole bunch of threads that I want to follow there. The first one is like this total projection of myself onto your circumstances, because I also, love the humanities and essay writing and deep thinking. And I think part of it, like when I started getting into the harder sciences, especially when I was researching, the books that I helped write, was like, it occurred to me like how good I was at bullshit, and how little room there was for that in, like understanding the chemical reactions involved in like mixed function oxidase.
Right.
It's like this whole superpower had been taken away from me, where I now actually had to like know facts.
Yeah, it's definitely been a really good challenge, and a really good just like complete switch in terms of like the way that I learn and the way that I study. Like I've had to take an entirely new approach and really dig in more, and it's helping me with the whole like growth mindset versus fixed mindset, like really working on my growth mindset and believing that even though these foundational classes don't come easily to me, I'm so invested in making sure that I know this information, because I know that it's going to lay a foundation for the stuff that I really do care about, that actual applicable nutrition knowledge, So I think it's been good, been good for me.
So the other thing that I'm curious about, and I've been curious about this since I heard you on the Thought for Food podcast. I think you were talking with Jackson. And you kind of got into this issue of like, why the hell are you doing that in the first place? Like, what like for a dietitian, and I understand you're going to Loma Linda, which is different than X state, but to have to navigate a world of nutritional science that you don't really believe, to get a couple of letters in front of your name, like what's the calculus that went into deciding like this is a challenge I want to take up? Right.
Well, I'll start by mentioning that as much as I chose Loma Linda for the fact that it has the Seventh-day Adventist background, which puts them naturally eating a vegetarian diet, or just not everyone, but a large amount of the population naturally eats a vegetarian diet based on their religious principles. And as you know, the Adventist health studies take place there, and it's one of the blue zones of the world. Like, that was definitely why I chose the school, especially because of the research they do there, so that I can learn from them and potentially be involved. But I will say, it's not like they teach plant-based nutrition. They teach a general nutrition program, and they still teach the benefits of eggs and fish and dairy and not that I've started yet, but just from what I've heard from people who work at the university, or from people who are in those classes or who have taken those classes, it's not like the the pot of gold. but it is definitely the best option that I was aware of at the time when I was applying. So I'm very fortunate and excited to be going there, but I wanted to just like throw that in there because I still will be paying a lot of money and going into debt in order to learn things that I know are incorrect, which was a tough decision to make for sure.
Right. So like when I go to like, we met at Plant Stock and I go to events like that and I hear the doctors talking and then I have a coaching consulting practice around health. Like, I wonder like what is the marginal benefit of an RD degree? If I'm just basically telling people, hey, you guys should eat this, don't eat that, this is good for you, that's not good for you, read a couple of books. Like where I feel like I can handle like 99% of the questions without knowing the details. So what attracted you to this professional track?
Right. So I definitely think that you're correct. I'm sure that you are a wonderful health and nutrition and lifestyle coach, and I'm sure your clients are getting amazing results, and you definitely don't need a degree in order to gain knowledge and be able to work with people. I feel like at this point I know that I still have so much to learn. I think we always have so much to learn, but I do feel like there are a lot of, for the most part, I can work with people, and I do work with some people and help them to change their diet, and I know a lot of information, and you can be self-taught these days, especially because, like we're saying, these institutional degrees often teach you so much that is incorrect that you have to then unlearn. But that being said, I think that for the professional goals that I have, I want to have the degree because I want to kind of create change more from inside the system rather than pushing from outside of the system. And that being said, I don't know if I'll graduate and take my degree to go on and work in, a standard hospital setting or an inpatient or outpatient medical clinic or anything like that. I think that I will maybe do something a little different, but I do want to have the traditional degree just because I know that is what is currently respected in our society and what will enable me to work with people who aren't able to afford something outside of, what their medical insurance covers, or, to be able to just lend that degree to the movement in a way that will serve all of us. I think that I just want to have the doors open to me to be able to create that change from the inside. And as much as there's so much of dietetics that it's hard to believe in, and I guess in some ways respect when you know that there's so much wrong, I also really want to see the future of healthcare moving in a direction of lifestyle medicine and preventive medicine, and using, well, not just preventive, but also treatment through nutrition and lifestyle practices. And I want to see that change, and I know that I have to, if I want to see that change, I have to help create it.
Gotcha. So you're like Gorbachev biding his time in the KGB until he can take over and democratize Russia.
Yeah, I guess so.
Holding your nose a little bit so you can get in and get honored, so then you can start making changes from within.
Right, and I'm sure that there will be parts of the dietetics degree and training that will be good information to know, and then I think there will be other parts where it's like, okay, like it's just good to get a sense of what other people in this field are learning. Like this is what our dietitians go through in this country in order to get certified, and this is how they're trained. So knowing this and knowing what foundation they're given, it will help me to see what I might need to do in order to help change that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. So like you and I can talk all day about how doctors don't learn about nutrition, but it's hard to believe. But when like Garth Davis or, Linda Carney or someone says, yeah, I had like half an hour of nutrition in medical school and it was all about IV feeding. Like then you go, oh, okay, well, they actually lived it. They're not just repeating something they heard.
Right. And then they're better able to say like, okay, where in the medical school training process could we implement, nutrition? And, they've been through it. They know how other doctors have been trained. And so they know what they're working with in their field, Right.
So one of the reasons, the main reason I wanted to interview you after meeting you at Plant Stock, it wasn't like you haven't done research, you don't have this, long pedigree. What really impressed me was sort of your ability to communicate the joy and happiness and pleasure of this lifestyle in a way that I can't, and that almost no one I know can. And that you have a certain sort of just, loving presence around it, that when people see you and are around you and they hear a little bit about you, they're like, wow, that sounds like a really fun party. Where's the velvet rope that I can climb under and get in? So kind of just as a full disclosure, like what I really have appreciated about you is the positivity and spirit and artistry that you bring as an advocate to this lifestyle.
Wow. Well, thank you for saying that. No one has ever said that or quite put it into those words, and I really appreciate that.
Well, ask them. I bet they'd all agree.
Thank you. That was beautifully said.
Yeah. Unfortunately, for an interviewer, it wasn't a question, so
right.
I didn't tee you up for anything. But I guess the question maybe is, like, how did you get here from where you were? Maybe it's a good time to kind of go into your origin story.
Right.
Did you grow up on an ashram,
right.
Chewing on kale as a pacifier? Or?
The good old origin story. Okay, so it was not an ashram upbringing. I grew up in a suburb outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my family is wonderful in a lot of ways. I had a very beautiful, sheltered in a way childhood. Like I didn't have, a lot of people go through different trying things in their childhoods, and I had a very loving family and was always taken care of, and I have a lot to be really grateful for in those senses. I was a gymnast growing up, and I never really thought about food. Like, I can't remember actually thinking about food and nutrition and all that stuff really until like middle school. When I was younger, you see people who are overweight and things, but I really thought that like people who are overweight are people who like eat at McDonald's every day. And I was always like, I had my fair share of fast food. Like the gymnastics, the gym where I went to was like 30 to 40 minutes from my house, and there was a group of girls that, were in the carpool together, and after practice, we would usually stop at either McDonald's or Burger King or Dunkin' Donuts, or there was this place called Rax that was another fast food place that was kind of like an Arby's. But we did that pretty often, and then, even when we didn't do that, dinner was often a Hot Pocket or something like that. And I will say, like, to my parents' credit, they are relatively health conscious. So, and even more so now that I've gotten more health conscious. But, when I was younger, like, we always had vegetables at dinner, and we didn't buy, like, Stouffer's, like, mac and cheese or, like, microwave meals on the regular. We didn't have, I would have, like, one Lunchable package a year. Like, when I would go to this summer camp, it was, like, one time we were allowed to get Lunchables, and it was really exciting. And we weren't allowed to have, like, Cookie Crisp cereal for breakfast or whatever. But, we also ate, like, a relatively standard American diet. Like, plenty of meat, plenty of cheese, I ate tons of the processed lunch meats. I ate my fair share of hot dogs and hamburgers and bacon and eggs and, all that stuff. So
And
while
as a gymnast, were you like a, after school gymnast or like a 4 a.m. gymnast? Like how serious did you get?
So I was pretty serious, but I wasn't a 4 a.m. gymnast. I practiced 4 or 5 days a week for about 4 hours each time. I guess more like, 3.5 to 4 hours each time. And I was a gymnast basically from like my earliest memories. I started gymnastics when I was not even 3 years old. And then by age 7, I was competing, and I competed from age 7 until age 13.
So at any point, were you harboring Olympic dreams, like at that level of
No, I wasn't harboring Olympic dreams. It was something that I was serious about, and that was a key part of my identity, but I personally was not feeling like it was something that I wanted to go do professionally. I guess I did. I mean, I can't even think that I was thinking that far ahead to college yet, but I think that if you had asked me when I was like, 8, 9, 10, 11, like, do you want to do this when you're in college? Like, do you want to continue doing this as long as you can? I would have said yes. Uh-huh. But somewhere around age like 12, 13, it just started getting to my head, and I started really questioning everything that I was doing that, I had the muscle memory for, and I had the skill level to do physically, but mentally, I was just like questioning all of it. And it started out with the balance beam, and, I was doing this skill where you do a back handspring connected to a back handspring on the balance beam, and I just I had been doing it, and I'd been practicing it, and then it came time for the competitive season to start, and I started having these brain blocks, and I wouldn't. So anyways, it all got to that point, and it was a really rough year. Maybe it was even a little over a year where I was really struggling with that, and my coaches, everyone always does their best, but they did not handle it in a way that was beneficial to me. And eventually I couldn't handle the mental stress and anxiety that I was going through every day, because it was kind of that thing. Have you heard of the double arrow? You shoot yourself, or you get shot with one arrow, and then the feelings that you have about that decide whether or not you get shot with the second arrow, and that second arrow is your own feelings about what you're going through, or your feelings about your feelings. And so not only was I experiencing anxiety, I was also putting myself down and telling myself that I shouldn't be feeling this, and why all of a sudden am I scared of these things that I've been doing for years, and why, I was just. And then I would sit there and be nervous. I would sit in school and be nervous that I was going to get nervous and not be able to do things when I got to gymnastics that night. And, it was getting to the point where I was not mentally healthy, and I just couldn't. It wasn't fun for me anymore. And so I quit, but I went through this entire, loss of identity, because I had friends at school, but the people that I spent the majority of my time with, because I was spending all of my evenings at gymnastics, and then on the weekends I was at gymnastics meets, and my core group of people was my friends from gymnastics, and everyone at school knew me as the gymnast, and I had not really thought about what would I do if I wasn't in gymnastics. And all of a sudden I found myself in this place where it was I'm no longer spending any time with all of my friends, and they're all doing this thing that I'm not doing anymore. And, they were all still, friendly and nice to me. It's not like my friends were oh, she quit, we're, cutting her off. But it was just, I was in this different place. And So that,
I imagine there might have been some awkwardness and people, feeling a little self-conscious and sorry for you, and thank God it wasn't them. Right?
yeah, I mean,
It sounds like, when you're 12 or 13, now you can say, well, then I stopped gymnastics and it doesn't have any juice to it. But at that time in your life, when you're you're beginning to come into your identity, this was like a form of death, wasn't it?
yeah, oh, absolutely. It was a really rough time, and it did feel like I didn't really know who I was, and I was kind of in this place of like, okay, like who am I going to be now? And so to tie this back into, the food and like my vegan story and my health story is that when I was in gymnastics, I was constantly working out, and I knew that I was active and thin and healthy, and I didn't really think about it that much. And when I quit gymnastics, it put me in this place where I started thinking more about like, wait, I don't know if I can just not think about things anymore. Like maybe I need to think about food and what I'm eating and how much I'm moving my body. And like it just put me in this place where I started to think about these things in a way that I hadn't before. And of course this also happened. I mean, 13, 14 is an age where this often happens for women, especially because it's when we're hitting puberty and we're starting to have those changes in our bodies anyways. And so that kind of all just kind of came together at that time in my life and put me in a place where I started thinking about food. And that could have been a positive thing, just at, point blank, like without adding any extra feelings or circumstances to it. It's not necessarily a bad thing for someone to start thinking about what they eat or how they move their body. But for me, I was not just thinking about it in that way. I was thinking about like, I started putting this extra weight to it, and I started restricting more than I needed to. Like I was not coming from a place of being overweight. I was a healthy, very fit post-gymnastics person, and I wasn't eating I was eating well, but I started restricting food, and I had made a friend, this person was a beautiful friend to me during a time in my life when, like I said, all of my best friends were suddenly, in one decision, all of my best friends where I was, they lived in different places and didn't go to the same school as me, so suddenly I found myself in this place where, like, my core group, I was no longer with them, and I made this one friend at school, and she was really an important part of that transition time for me. But anyway, she was on the cross-country team, and so she invited me to join her in doing cross-country, and so I did that for a little while. I also I also tried out, there's actually a sport called trampoline, which I did for a while, which is a fun fact that I sometimes forget that I did that for a year. But anyways, I became a runner, and then I started dancing. And so my freshman year of high school, I was doing cross country and track and dance. And especially during the track season, when track season and dance were going on at the same time, I was literally going from school straight to track, and I would be at track until like 4:30 or 5, and then I would dance from like 5 until 8:30 or 9, and then I would get home and have a quick dinner and finish my homework until like 11, and then go to sleep and get up at 6 a.m. and do it all again. And on the weekends, I would often have like a dance competition one day and a track meet the next day. And so I was just constantly moving, which could have been fine. But because I was coming from a place where I had been restricting my food, and then I was now doing this, my body was just in a place where like there was no way it was going to get enough to eat. And so I had lost a ton of weight, and at the time, you know, I liked it. I felt great about it. But
can I ask you about the restriction? Because here's where I thought the story was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you stopped doing gymnastics, you felt a little bit sort of alienated, and you turned to food for comfort, and you gained 40 pounds. Like that's what I was thinking the story was going to be, and then you developed disordered eating, and but you went immediately to restriction. So
yes.
first of all, I'm curious. Like what was your drug of choice for coping, if it wasn't food, and maybe let's start there. Like did you a 12, 13-year-old tends not to have a lot of emotional resources.
Mm-hmm.
Like what did you turn to for coping?
So I think that it was food that I turned to for coping, but for me, so in psychoanalyzing myself here, when I was in gymnastics and I was experiencing those mental struggles, I think that I was in a place where I felt out of control, and I felt like I was falling victim to the anxious thoughts in my head, and like they had power over me, and that I had no control and no power to overcome them, and I couldn't break free from them. And so I think that I found comfort in the control that I found that I had through food. And I think that was my whatever you called it, drug of choice, or my comfort. That was what helped me to cope in that time.
So here's a place where you did have agency, even if the voice was the voice telling you, like, yummy chocolate shake and fries, and you exerted control and said, I can't control what I hear, but I can control what I do about it.
Yeah, and obviously this is all subconscious. Like, at the time I wasn't thinking about these things. At the time it was like I remember a time when I was like sitting there and I was like with a couple of friends, and we had just gone to an amusement park, and we're like driving home, and I'm drinking like a Starbucks. I never liked coffee, but they used to have these, I don't know what Starbucks has these days, but it was like a strawberries and cream type of drink, and then I was like eating a bag of jelly beans, and I just remember thinking, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, I don't know if my, like, what if this stuff actually starts to affect me? Like, I haven't done a workout in like a month or whatever, and I just remember having that moment, and I don't remember like from then moving forward like exactly what pace it progressed, but it got to a point where I knew what foods were lower calorie and what foods were higher calorie, and I was definitely trying to make sure, and I wasn't like counting. I never had a point where, I know that some people go through things where they like count everything specifically, and I never like counted my calories. I just was very aware of like not eating very much. And then, once I was dancing and running, like I ate enough I never like passed out, and I was always fueling myself enough to do everything that I did, I lost a lot of weight, but I never lost so much that I looked emaciated, where people were like, I'm sure there were a lot of people who were worried about me, and there were people that voiced it, but I never hit that point where it's like, okay, this person is becoming truly emaciated and definitely needs to be checked into a facility. It was more like I was always kind of borderline. And
so were you dysmorphic in like you'd look at yourself and say, no, I got to lose another 5 pounds?
A little bit. I would say that more so than feeling like I needed to lose weight, I always just felt like I didn't want to gain weight. So even when I lost a lot of weight, I was dysmorphic in the sense that I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I lost so much weight. But I never thought I was fat. I always was just like, okay, but I don't want to gain weight.
Yeah, so a very defensive posture.
Yes. So anyways.
I mean, when I think about like 13-year-old girl gymnasts, I don't think of them packing on a lot of pounds. Like,
right. Yeah.
If they keep going 4 or 5 hours a day, by the time they're 18 or 22, they still look like they're 12, right?
Right. Yeah. So anyways, during this time, my mom did notice that I was losing weight, and she, voiced her concern, and we didn't even have a scale in the house. And, she went out and bought a scale and showed me that I had lost a lot of weight, and I ended up going to a couple of doctors about it. And, this is where, thinking back, it's, I'm grateful for the journey that has brought me here, but certain things are just like, frustrating to think about. Like, I remember going to a doctor who was like, okay, like, you've lost X amount of pounds since your last checkup. Like, you need to gain weight again. You're clearly an active person. And at this point I was like 14, maybe I think I was 14 when I'm talking about all of this, maybe 15 if we're talking freshman year of high school. And so, I'd lost my period, so of course they, rather than saying like, let's try having you gain some weight and see what happens, they just put me on the pill. And I was like, okay, now I get my period, so it's all good. Like, these just, the way that they decided to, help me with things, quote, help me with things, were not very helpful. Or I remember I went to one doctor who was like, okay, you need to gain some weight, so the best way to do that sounds like you eat. It's not like you're not eating. So try and put butter on like most of your meals, or like have a Snickers bar at night before you go to bed. Just like any way for me to add like extra calories. They were just like, add calories and add fattening calories.
Yeah, you didn't mention specifically like what your gymnastic coaches were doing that wasn't helpful, but I'm sort of imagining that at this period of your life, like 11 to 15, you're kind of getting a PhD in reductionist symptomology.
Yes.
It's like, and knowing I know where we're going to go in this conversation a little bit. With your current outlook and views, in that you're really a pull it up by the roots sort of person. I'm imagining that this education in seeing how people dealt with your emotional and psychological and performance issues, and with your weight and eating issues, by doing just stupid reductionist stuff that really just addressed the symptoms, must have sort of informed some sort of rebellion against that.
Yeah. Oh, completely. And yeah, so to mention, I don't know if you're interested, but basically my coaches in gymnastics, they basically, their response to like when I was dealing with this stuff was, we know that you are capable of perfection, so until you get back to doing these skills perfectly, you're not allowed to compete. So basically, I was able to like semi-overcome my fear of this one skill, specifically on the beam. The skill that I decided to compete was not the back handspring, but the back walkover back handspring. And there was a tiny pause that I would do in between the back walkover and the back handspring, rather than like the full smooth connection. And when I would do that one pause, it's like a 2/10 deduction. So basically, if I knew I was going to do that pause, this was back before they changed the scoring. So when I was in gymnastics, it was, 10.0 was the best. And so my routine was basically, if I was automatically going to do this, it was as if I was saying, if I do this routine perfectly, including this pause, I'll get a 9.8. And of course, I never did it that perfectly, so I would never get a 9.8. But knowing just that I was capable of perfection, even though I did the skill, I was able to overcome my fear, and I would do the skill with this little tiny 2/10 deduction pause in it, they were like, you're not allowed to compete. So every other year that I was in gymnastics, I would go to the sectional meets, the regional meet, the state meet. I would go on to these big meets, but you have to have an all-around score to do that. And I didn't compete beam the entire year. And then the one meet of the year where they let me compete beam was the one meet of the year where your all-around score didn't count to qualify you for sectionals and states. And that was, just really difficult for me because, I had found a way where I was like, okay, I've found a way to overcome this, and I feel okay about this. And they were like, this isn't, you're capable of more. And if you're not going to reach this perfection that you're capable of, then we're not going to, it was like an all or nothing thing.
Right.
So anyways.
So the assumption is the problem is you're not motivated enough, so we're gonna up the ante to get you motivated because that's why you're not perfect.
Right. And for me, it was, not that at all. So, and then what else did you ask about that was on the food side?
So I mean, let's take it to, how bad did the relationship with food and body image get?
Yeah. Okay. So it was a long process because this all started, like I said, around 8th grade, and then the summer between 8th grade and 9th grade is when I really dropped a ton of weight, and then 9th grade is the year where, looking back at pictures, I'm really thin, and but then over time, for the next 5 years after that, it was very much like a healing process with some ups and downs. But basically after my freshman year, when I started seeing all these doctors and it was my weight was becoming a point of discussion, I hit a point where I was like, this is dumb. I'm not going to sit here and add butter to my meals and, eat these, just these foods that I knew weren't healthy, just to gain weight. And I was very much a people pleaser. I very much wanted to make everyone think and know that I was okay and that I was, this perfect person. I just really wanted to please people and make people proud of me and happy with me. And so I think as much as it, was about making myself healthy, it also was about proving to other people that I was okay at first. But I just hit a point where I was like, this is not, the way that they're telling me to gain weight are not healthy. And so I was like, I need to start looking into actual, what is healthy? How can I, this is just too stressful to live in this way. And how can I fix this? How can I find a way to really feel at peace with food and feel good about what I'm eating and nourish my body in the process? Because there has to be a way to do that. And so I went from kind of this restrictive eating to more of a health-focused eating. And again, while that can be well-meaning, for a little while I took it to an extreme where, because it's one thing to be eating healthfully from a place of truly loving yourself and nourishing your body, and there's another one to eat healthfully from a place of fear. And I was eating healthfully from a place of fear, and it was not so much the love of the healthy foods, but also the fear of the bad foods, or what I had labeled bad foods. And so that was a whole nother cycle, and that lasted however many months or a year. It tends to blur in time. But basically, over time, I just more and more so was working through this basically on my own. I never went to therapy. No one ever suggested to me that I go to therapy. No one ever suggested that I see a specialist for any of this. And I didn't really have anyone that I could talk to about it. So it was really just all internally me going through different phases and testing things out with myself and just overcoming it over time. And I actually, before I was applying for schools, when I was first looking into colleges, I had decided that I wanted to be a dietitian because I had done a good amount of healing, and I was in a place where I felt better about food and the importance of eating healthy, and I was watching a tragically large amount of girls on my track team go through struggles with eating based on feeding off of one another, no pun intended, as well as the coach. So my track coach, the head track coach, was a great, loving coach in many ways. He thought he was doing the best that he could, or, he thought he was doing what was best for everyone. But there were, at least 6 girls on my track team that either had full-blown eating disorders or were dealing with disordered eating. And I personally don't think it was handled well. I think that the girls who did have eating disorders were touted and made into examples. Like, look at what these girls are doing. Like, they're winning their races. They're doing all these things. And then one of them got checked into an eating disorder inpatient facility, and another one, and it's sad. I'm not trying, I love all of these girls dearly, and it was sad to watch everyone go through this, but basically I was in a place where I was watching this happen, and I was like, these discussions that we're having about food cannot be right, and I want to go become a dietitian and be a sports dietitian and work with sports teams and help girls and boys, help athletes to fuel their body in a healthy way where we're focused on nutrition and nourishment and energizing, fueling foods rather than how to keep our weight down so that we have, the best race. And I really was becoming passionate about that. But then...
So at that point, did you, because, you had lived your life as a life of discipline, right? And you were surrounded by coaches and teammates and expectations where, discipline is good. 4 hours is better than 3.5.
Exactly.
Not indulging in this food is better than indulging in this food. And so, and your best athletes, your best runners were the ones who were held up as being the most disciplined. And part of that discipline was this unhealthy relationship with food and all these restrictions. Did you begin to develop a different kind of discernment that it wasn't simply like a slippery slope from really disciplined to eating disorder to this understanding of, fear versus love? Like, where were you in terms of your understanding of there's a qualitative difference as opposed to just a difference of degree?
So I think I was starting to realize that, but a lot of that really came later. It was really once I started eating a plant-based diet that I think that really all came full circle for me. But I definitely was in a place where I was realizing that more restriction and more discipline doesn't always serve us. And so I definitely was at that realization. Anyways, to finish up what could be a long story, by the time I went to college, I was at a healthier weight, and I was feeling much better about my relationship with food. And I think that there was always still something in the back of my mind that was just searching for that place of true inner peace with everything. Like I remember the summer before I went to college, you have to get a physical, and they sent it into the school, and the school sent back a thing that was like, hey, like, we noticed that you're on the borderline of being underweight. And so my doctor recommended that I drink Ensure. So for the first semester that I was in college, I would go to the local CVS and buy packages of Ensure and drink an Ensure a day. And I can't believe I did that now. But at the time, I was just like, I'm done with this. I'm done with, people being worried about me, and I'm done with being underweight. I will do whatever it takes to just, and I just, was at a point where I was like, I'm going to trust what these doctors say, because I just want to be in a better place with all of this. But I was not, at that point, I wasn't restricting food, intentionally or anything like that. I really was happy with, I really felt a much better sense of peace and healing from where I had been. But anyways, so I did not join the cross-country team or track team when I was in college. I decided that I really just wanted to have fun with those sports as much as I loved running. I didn't want to commit myself to a team anymore. I was really ready to just kind of make that a more relaxing part of my life, and not something that less of a commitment, less of something that I was going to put pressure on myself about. And I really wanted to focus on school and schoolwork when I was in college. So, but I kept running, and I signed up for some half marathons and for these triathlons I got into for a little while. And I loved it. I was super into running. And the book that was a catalyst for so much change in my life was the book Born to Run. And I read that book the summer between my freshman year and sophomore year of school. And have you read that book? I'm guessing you have. Yeah. So the book doesn't argue for veganism or anything like that, but it does profile Scott Jurek, and it talks about the Tarahumara Indians and the way that they are able to run, 50, 60 miles a day on average, and they basically eat corn and beans and chia. And that just really piqued my interest. And I had a friend who had recently gone vegetarian, and I just the word vegan and stuff had just been popping up in my life lately, just in different ways. When you start to pay attention to something or something piques your interest, then it starts popping up all over the place. And that's kind of what happened. And so I basically was like, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to try this vegan thing and see what happens. And I made the decision while I was training for a triathlon. I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to get enough protein and mess up my training. So, of course, I waited until after the triathlon was done. But I finished the triathlon mid-September, so very early in my sophomore year of school. And then 2 days later, I decided I was going to go vegan. And at the time, it was just like I said, an experiment. I was like, maybe I'll do this for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, who knows? I'm just going to try this and see how it feels, how I like it. And from there, it just, I felt great. I felt healthy. I felt, and yeah, I felt really good instantly eating that way, just in terms of, just physically. And then the more that I continued to learn about it, because as I was eating that way, my boyfriend bought me a vegan cookbook, and I started, reading articles, and I watched, some documentaries, and then the more that I learned, the more I was really starting to feel into it and feel like this was right and what I wanted to keep doing. And then I saw Forks Over Knives, and that changed it all. I mean, I watched that movie, and I feel like I just always had this sense that there is a way to eat that is in alignment with what our body wants and needs, and I was intent on figuring out what it was. And I knew that there was a place where you could have a relationship with food that wasn't this guilty pleasure or like love-hate, like this like bad-good thing, teetering on one another, where it's all good, it's all pure love, healthy nourishment, like that had to exist because food is integral in fueling our bodies and it's part of nature. And I feel like I always had that sense. And when I saw Forks Over Knives, it showed me everything that I feel like I had known was there. Like I watched this movie and was just like, food has so much power and it is healing, and we have so much power over our health. And it just, I was, in that moment, I was sold, and I knew that that's what I wanted to. It was, I mean, this might sound silly, but I really felt like I watched that movie and was like, this is what I want to devote my life to, studying and understanding and helping people with and helping myself with. And after I finished that movie, like, I remember sitting on Amazon the next day and buying like 7 books. And as I was reading the books, I started emailing different people and asking everyone if I could come shadow them and learn from the different doctors. And I ended up going and staying with Pam Popper for my spring break that year and learning from her. And from then onward, it just became, down the rabbit hole. I just kept learning and reading, and that's how I ended up getting involved with Engine 2. I went to the very first plant stock. Fun fact, I've been at every plant stock so far. So I went to that first one, and I talked to Rip Esselstyn, and I was there with 2 friends and our parents, and I started interning with Engine 2, and then that just, from there it's just been a beautiful journey. So it's been 6 years now, and every single day I become more passionate, and every single day I feel even better about it. Like, it just has truly transformed my life and has been a really big initiator in transforming my relationship with food and my relationship with myself, because I'm a big believer that the relationship that we have with food is a mirror of the relationship that we have with ourselves. And just every step of the journey has been powerful and healing. And as much as I do feel like I had done a lot of really deep healing by the time that I found a plant-based diet, I also really credit a plant-based diet to helping me make that final turn, because when you're eating a plant-based diet, you're filling your life with an abundance of foods that are so nourishing, and the more that you learn, the more that you not only see that it's what's best for yourself, but it's also beyond you. It's what is best for everyone, for the environment, for this world at large, for our community, for the well-being of animals, for everything. And it just becomes this beautiful place of what I was saying, where it's all working in harmony with nature and your body and the world at large. And that is so beautiful and powerful to feel like you're part of that and know that you're fueling that system in a way that is really positive and beneficial.
And one thing that really strikes me about your story is that while all your struggles were going on, while you were going to these doctors and struggling with your coaches, that there was an illusion that this was your personal problem, mm-hmm. right? That this was all about like your psychology, and you can so clearly see that it's that your manifestation of difficulties was so totally embedded into the culture, into the culture of achievement and performance, into the culture of how girls and women's bodies should look, into the culture of this is the normal food that we eat. Is that it's like you have a unique twist on the story, but we all are. It's like trying to grow healthy plants in an unhealthy field. Like you ultimately had to kind of opt out of the mainstream understanding of food and nutrition and self-care in order to heal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great thing to point out. Like this is my story, but yes, it is totally a story that comes from the environment and society that we live in, 100%. And I think that's really what has, laid the grounding for me to be so passionate about all of this. And as I'm sure you know, as much as I love helping people to understand the power that they have over their health in terms of, lowering their cholesterol and lowering their blood pressure and bringing everything into a healthy range, preventing heart disease, preventing or reversing diabetes, all sorts of things, autoimmune conditions even. At the same time, I also think that, the mental and emotional aspects that surround eating are also very disordered these days for everyone. I mean, this is, potentially a controversial thing to say, but I feel like most people in the United States have some form of disordered eating. We are emotional eaters, and so many people have this when, food is a source of pleasure, but it's also a source of guilt. It's a source of fear. It's a source of anxiety. And that, to me, is what I really want to help people change, is healing that relationship and finding a sense of mindfulness and peace and just really transforming our relationship that we have with food, because food is something that should empower us, not disempower us.
Yeah. And, you mentioned, I think it was in the interview with his name Dylan from
Oh, yes.
That for a long time you were ashamed of your background in disordered eating, and you were trying to hide it from yourself and from other people. And, as I was listening to that, I was like, I was listening to that while I was running, and I was, if I'd had any breath, I would have been screaming like, "No, Tara, no, don't you understand? This is your superpower." Right?
Yeah.
That you have, that like I could have all the science and skills in the world, but I am not going to be able to work with, 14-year-old girls with eating disorders in any degree of effectiveness like you would, because you've been there, you've had the experience. And so, I'm really curious about how you healed the shame. I sort of understand how you healed the dysmorphia and how you changed your diet. But I know a lot of people, especially girls, who've gone vegan. And when I look at how they eat vegan, I still look at them and go, they're still disordered. They're using their veganism as a cudgel or as a punishment or as another means of hyper control. And luckily you came to it kind of after you had done some of that healing. But I'm curious, like, what was your process for getting to a place where you could say, I am at peace with food, and I'm doing this for very simple reasons of self-love?
Yeah. So there's a couple things in there. I completely agree with you, and it is sad to see that happening sometimes. And it's hard because I think that, sometimes we look at people and we make judgments just based on what's on their plate. But two people can eat the exact same meal, and one person can be eating from a place of fear, and one person can be eating from a place of love. So it's really hard to judge just by what you see someone eating in terms of what's going on in their minds mentally. That being said, overcoming the shame was probably the most difficult thing I've ever gone through. And it was not just that one, I don't want to call it little, but like that one thing. It was, there was a lot wrapped up in that. There was, everything that got me to that place, and there was a lot of healing that had to take place. And I had the help of a wonderful therapist when I was living in DC that helped me through a lot of that, as well as many people that didn't work with me personally but just have been very helpful teachers, such as the work of Brene Brown or Tara Brach and other authors. But to talk about the food side of things and how I was able to really come into a place of knowing that I was eating from a place of love and not fear, is it really came down to true. The name of one of Tara Brach's book is Radical Acceptance, and I'm going to take that term and say true radical acceptance, which is like just overall 100%, like no exceptions, acceptance of who I am and what I've been through. And if I'm able to feel that with myself, and if someone is able to come into a place where no matter what they accept, no matter what is true about themselves, they accept it, then it puts you in a place where you feel safe to really look your insecurities and your, quote, flaws in the face. And I think that before, I wasn't able to do that because I was so afraid that they were true. And so when I'm now coming from a place of no matter what is true, I know that it's okay, and I know that I'm still worthy of love, and it doesn't make me a broken or unlovable, or it doesn't, no matter what is true about myself, I know that it will be okay. And so coming from that place of, unconditional self-compassion has enabled me to be really real and honest with myself when things aren't okay. And it's funny how that happens. But so I think that, at this point, I know that I can be real with myself, and I'm able to put myself in check. And I'm, for the most part, I don't think about, I know that I don't think about a lot of this as much anymore, but I do stay mindful of it because I know that I don't want to ever go back to those places where I was feeling restrictive or eating from a place of fear. So I think what really it comes down to is developing that unconditional love for myself and being able to look honestly at where the source of my decisions was coming from, and then acting on that and moving through that. And so there are times where I've had to challenge myself in ways and just kind of work almost, work with myself as if I'm my own client, and work through why, really ask myself, why am I making these decisions and what is fueling certain decisions? So, I think you said that you listened to the podcast that I did with Dylan, and at the time when I did that podcast with my friend Dylan on his Plant Power podcast, I was eating raw for a period of time and loving it. But I remember when I first started doing that, I was like, okay, I'm like trying out this raw style of this diet. And I was like, I really need to make sure that I'm doing this not out of place of like,
Right. Out of here's the next step.
right. Like not, I was trying to think of, there's the term being thrown around now, orthorexia, and that's what I was trying to pull up in my mind. And not from a place of like, I'm afraid of anything other than perfection. I need to do this because this is the ultimate healthy thing to do. And I never wanted to feel restricted. And so I didn't commit myself to any amount of time. I wasn't like, I'm doing a raw diet. I wasn't like, I'm going to do this for a year. I wasn't like, I'm going to do this for 6 months. I was just like, I'm going to do this today because it feels good and this is what my body wants. And then I would wake up the next day and say the same thing. And I didn't know when it was going to end or how long it was going to last. And I'm really glad that when I did hit a point where I was like, you know what? I feel like I really want something else today. Then I went out and I made that happen. And so I think
that's the nice thing, especially as you become a sort of public persona. We haven't talked about your incredible Instagram feed and social media presence and the fact that you are an influence on a lot of people. That when your commitment is to sort of truth and discernment, then you get to make decisions in your own best interest without having to, put energy into your mask.
Right.
Into the thing, what you talked about earlier is like being a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. Like I could imagine someone who says, oh, okay, I'm raw now, and all the raw people, congratulate you and send you kudos, and then you're like jonesing for a baked potato, and you're like, I can't let them down, or I can't let them know.
Yeah. So I definitely think that the mindfulness is key. And yes, the people pleasing, I'm definitely a recovering people pleaser. And as much as I still love to make people happy and bring people joy and, make people proud and, do things for other people, do things for my friends and live a life of service, I also have learned that I need to exert self-care and I need to be authentic and be in touch with myself first and foremost, and act always from a place where I'm doing myself proud and I'm not sacrificing any part of myself in order to please other people, because when we do that, it's just a recipe for disaster. It always leaves us needing to look outside of ourselves for that validation. And I've learned that I need to be self-validating. I need to be my own best friend, my own mothering presence, my own sense of care and just, validation. I need to know within myself that I'm doing what is true and authentic to my values and who I am, and let that be okay, even if it's not what I think other people want from me. Because at the end of the day, we actually don't know what's going on in other people's heads, and what they think about us is a reflection of who they are, not who we are. And learning those types of lessons has been really important to my journey as well.
Yeah, and there's something really nice about the self-love in the way that you describe it. So I have to admit, when we first started emailing back and forth about topics, and you said self-love, I had this kind of knee-jerk negative reaction. Like it brought up a lot of my own shadow stuff, but I could just imagine, I'm a pretty sort of gentle guest, and I could imagine myself just like really going after you, like a prosecutor. What do you mean self-love? Like it really challenged some of my areas in which I need healing. But in listening to you talk in other podcasts and coming to understand what you're talking about, self-love really, it's nothing personal. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's sort of just a fact of the universe, as opposed to I have to think that everything I do is okay, or pretend, or more like what I was reacting against is this idea of like self-love is I'm going to pretend everything's okay about myself, or I'm just going to repeat affirmations and I'm just going to look at the good and I'm going to say I love myself no matter what. And, just a kind of giant slippery slope to complacency.
Right.
As opposed to self-love, to me, in the past year or so, I've become a runner. I've put myself in pain many times trying to achieve goals. And for me, self-love carries a very fierce edge. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm starting to understand when you talk about self-love, is it becomes the substrate for the work you do on yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that was a beautiful way to put it. Thank you, Howard. And I'm glad that you're finding that in your own life and that you're coming around to it in that way, because it can be a turnoff for some people when you say self-love. Or, another way that I've heard people not really resonate with it, that's a little bit different than what you described, is some people will say to me, I don't think that we should just think we're the best, that we should just, really love everything about ourselves. And it's not that self-love isn't about thinking that we're the best. It's not about comparing ourselves to anyone else or putting ourselves above everyone else. So maybe, in some ways, self-compassion might be a better term that might resonate more with people, because it's not necessarily thinking that we're better than anyone else, or that, that we think that everything about ourselves is great,
Right. Maybe most of us just hope for the absence of self-loathing.
Right.
A good place to start.
Right. Exactly.
It's I don't know what other people are thinking in their deepest, darkest places, but I know what I'm thinking in my deepest, darkest places, and I hope nobody ever finds out, because it's pretty alarming.
Right. And I think that's the key, is that we need to change the conversation with ourselves. And like I was saying before, if we're not able to bring light into those dark places and to explore them, then they're just going to sit within us and fester. And going back to the shame thing, that's definitely something that I dealt with, is, I pushed aside those feelings and was just I'm fine now, that's in the past, and nobody needs to know about that, and I'm just not going to talk about it, and I'm going to overcome it. But it's until I'm able to, but that, that always ends up coming and showing up in our lives. And as much as we think that we push things down and we act like they don't exist, they do, and they manifest themselves in our lives in various ways, until we explore them and we bring them into the light and we make peace with them, and then from there we free ourselves from being controlled by them.
So I'm curious if you mentioned Tara Brach. Do you do meditation? Do you go on retreats? Do you have a practice? Or is this sort of just a daily, catch as catch can approach?
I haven't done any retreats in regards to meditation or self-love or things like that, but I have developed a meditation practice. I started that, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago now. I guess maybe 3 years ago. Wow. But yeah, about 2 or 3 years ago now, I started meditating, and meditation was a huge, huge part of all of this, healing for me. At this point, meditation is part of the way that I live, the way that I eat, the way that I, the values that I have. It just, it becomes one big circular, all connectedness. But yeah, so I meditate just about every morning. I need to be better about making sure that I keep up with it when I travel. I usually end up doing it a few days, but when I'm home, it's an everyday thing. Every single morning, first thing I do is I wake up and I meditate. And there are lots of different ways to meditate. When I first started, I used guided meditations via the Headspace app. And you know, meditation did not come easily to me. It's not something that I just sat down and like found my zen and was just, you know, sitting with like butterflies fluttering around. It was like really hard. Like I thought for years that like meditation was something that like yogi, like peaceful hippie people do. And like I like yoga. I'm like a hippie in a lot of ways. You know, I have those parts of me, but like my brain is always on. Like my entire life, like I can't remember any time where it wasn't hard for me to fall asleep. When I was little, I would annoy the crap out of my parents, staying up for hours, not being able to fall asleep because of one thing or another. And that continued through elementary school, through middle school, through high school, through college, like, and I tried lots of different things to try and fall asleep. I had like tapes of rain, and I would journal, and, you know, all of those things helped. But basically, the point is that my mind is always going, and it's one of those, you know, they call it the monkey mind. It's going, you know, always roving, going at 100 miles an hour. And so when I first started meditating, to even think about not thinking was just like really hard to imagine doing. And, you know, it would have been easy to get discouraged, but I read the book Real Happiness, and that was a really good intro to me. And then I started using the Headspace app, and just having the guided meditation I really needed at the beginning. But now I sit and I do a silent meditation. And
that's
like
funny because I've been doing the Headspace app for about 6 months, and I feel like I've graduated beyond it. Like I just I want to be slightly less manipulative around my practice and my thoughts, but I'm a little addicted to it because it keeps giving me these streaks, like how many days in a row. If I sit and meditate on my own, I'm like, I've got to call Andy Puttycomb and tell him I meditated today so he can add it to my stats.
Oh, I love it.
So it's like this mindfulness thing has become another achievement in my life.
Right.
I'm pleasing this guy who truly doesn't give a shit whether I'm
I know. It's funny how we turn all of these things into like ways to measure our success, or, you know, to track how well we're doing with things. It's really funny. But yeah, so I know that, you know, there are guided meditations, there are visual meditations, there are all sorts of ways that people do it. But for me, what is most powerful is to just find space and get that silence. And I've gone to guided meditations before a couple of times, and they don't work for me. I take the ideas and my mind goes off with them. And so for me, for right now, the silent meditation is what I really get the most from. And it's just really, you know, it's one thing to tell people like, oh, like, you're not your thoughts. Like, you can separate from them. You're more than what your brain thinks of. But for me, I really needed to live it to learn it. So to find the breath and connect with the breath as a tool. And for someone who hasn't meditated, like, I can remember hearing people talk about this, and it was just like so hard to like conceptualize. But really, like, if I find myself in a place where I start to get anxious, I notice it, like, viscerally. I feel it, like, I know where in my body I start to feel stress, and I instantaneously, I notice it, I stop, and I just take some deep breaths and just like connect my focus and attention to my breath rather than where my brain was going. And it's so powerful. And so that has just been like such a gift in my life to find that I have this tool and this like haven that I can return to anytime with me always. And so that has been really powerful. And also, just, you know, understanding that I am stronger than the anxious thoughts that sometimes come into my brain. And, you know, the brain is a beautiful, powerful, amazing tool that we have that can help us to do so many ridiculously wonderful things, and can help us to form our perception and create the experience that we live in each day. But for those of us that have anxious tendencies, it can also be an enemy and something that we fear. And so to learn that I don't need to fear my own brain, and that, I can, separate from any thoughts that don't serve me, has been a key part of, making me who I am today and helping me to live in the way that I do and do what I do each day. So I'm very grateful to meditation.
Yeah, and it's interesting how we started out by talking about you had these anxious thoughts that you then sublimated into food so that you could control something, and now you're kind of addressing the anxious thoughts head on, but not with the agenda of control at all.
Right. Yes, and I think, like I said, like that has just been definitely just part of the entire process of working with who I am and the cards that I got dealt, and coming forward into being the best version of myself, and self-actualizing the person that I know that I am and can be. And I really believe that the more that we're able to be for ourselves who we know we are, when we think about, I wish I was as patient as this person, or I wish that I was more, I wish that I was, more, whether it's patient or smarter or more giving or more compassionate, like any of those things, like that we want to be, that place of want is coming from knowing that we already are those things. And I think that the more that we're able to just, self-actualize who we really are deep down, the more we're able to give ourselves to others. Because if we're feeling self-fulfilled and we're already full and we're not asking for validation, or we don't need other people to give us anything in order for us to feel loved and fulfilled and, okay, then we can just give ourselves in service with no agenda to others and to the world. And the more that we can love and accept ourselves, the more that we can have that same level of compassion for everyone else around us. And I definitely have, this is all mostly coming from experience. So I guess I can't say that this is true for everyone, definitely, but I personally think that it probably is, just because, I've read different books about it, and I've talked to other people who experience similar things. And it really, all of this whole journey, it's tied up in food, but it's so much more than food. But I like to focus on the food and the nutrition just because I think that it can be a really powerful catalyst for people. And I think that it can be the start of honoring yourself and doing what's best for yourself, and starting to think in new ways and rewire the way that we think and the way that we do things for ourselves. And we all eat every single day, and it's a really powerful opportunity to start changing the way that we do have the way that we think and the way that we have relationships with food. And like I've said, I think that changes our relationship with ourselves as well. Right.
And the other thing is that food, as you said, is a mirror for the relationship with ourselves. And I'm a big believer in, if you want to change the way you think, then start by changing the way you act, even if you're faking it. So that if I say, self-love means I'm eating this plate of delicious food because I want to nourish myself, well, before you get there, just start eating that plate of nutritious food, and that's going to be some proof to yourself, right? So when you try to figure out, who am I, what do I believe, you look for evidence. It's well, I drink coffee every day, therefore I'm a coffee drinker. I work in IT, therefore I'm a tech worker. I eat healthy food, therefore I'm someone who has the capacity to care about my body and love myself, so that the action can precede the intention sometimes.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I think that every action that we take is telling ourselves, I care about myself, or I don't care about myself. Like, I'm worthy of taking this step. I'm worthy of giving my body what is best, or, you know, I'm not worthy of this thing. And it's the same when we act in ways that are authentic or inauthentic to ourselves. You know, like I was saying about the people-pleasing thing, like anytime that I, you know, make a decision based on what I think someone else wants me to do versus something that I truly want to do, if I make a decision based on what I think other people want from me, but it isn't authentic to myself, that feels really crappy automatically. Like right away, I feel that. And that's a reminder that every time we make a decision, it is sending ourselves a message that it's sending ourselves a message. And, you know, sometimes that message is that, you know, we're worth this thing, or that we love ourselves, or that we're not worth it and we don't love ourselves. And I think that, like you were saying, like taking that action sends ourselves that message, and we notice that, you know, it's it's funny, it's very like meta, all these different levels, but it really is true. Whether it's the conversation that we have with ourselves mentally, or it's the actions that we take, it's all a communication with ourselves.
Right, and that's, I think, the value of mindfulness there, is that we're all going to make those mistakes, right? We're all going to say yes to things that maybe we should say no to. And if we're not mindful, we're not going to register those feelings in our bodies, those sensations, or we'll register them, but we won't attribute them to the correct cause, and then we'll go eat some crap to make ourselves feel better in the moment. So it's like it really is all connected. Right,
absolutely. And you know, going on top of that and connecting to what we said before, like when you eat healthy food, you notice, if you're being mindful, you notice how it makes you feel in comparison to when you eat the crappy food or the unhealthy food. Like you feel that in your body, that you feel lighter, you feel more energized, you don't feel lethargic. You know, there's a difference in the way that your body feels after you have a nourishing plant-based meal, or, you know, a processed animal foods-based meal. And noticing the way that it makes your body feel also, you know, plays into that. Like, it either will help you continue that cycle of making positive decisions for yourself, or, you know, if you let that go unnoticed, then it won't. So the mindfulness is definitely key.
Right. And I'm starting to understand, like, what tools you're bringing to whenever it is that you start your MPH-RD degree, in terms of your ability to be compassionate and loving with the people who are going to be teaching you stuff that you don't necessarily agree with. That I could see, you know, a lot of people I know, including myself, I have to say, if I went to become an MD because I felt like that was the way I needed to go to have a voice and influence, or an RD or whatever, that, you know, that I know that right now I would go in like with very sharp elbows.
Yeah.
And, you know, I might come out with a degree, but I wouldn't come out with a lot of friends. And I can see how the work you've done on yourself around self-love is going to allow you to navigate really gracefully, to gain all the things that there are to gain from that education, all the details, all the, you know, the science stuff that you never really chased after before, and still maintain your integrity and not have to, you know, please your professors by parroting things that you don't believe. I can see how, like, the most important training for you wasn't necessarily, like, you know, summer school in organic chemistry, but this life training of becoming a person who is confident in yourself, and therefore you get to be very generous with others.
Yeah, well, thank you for putting that into words, because I hadn't really thought about that specifically, but I think that you're right. I think that, you know, it's training for for all of life. And yeah, I really do hope that I'm able to gracefully navigate school, where I'm learning everything that I can and growing in every way that the opportunity presents itself to me, but also not losing sight of what I know to be true, and sticking to those high standards that I want to set for society and for myself, and knowing and believing that this world is better than it's currently existing, and helping to be part of actualizing what I know this world, what we all have within us, and holding us to making that happen, and trying to help move that process along.
Right on. So I'm looking at the time. We've talked for a long time. It hasn't felt like it, but my clock tells me that it has been. So there's so much more that we're not going to talk about, but you've been on other podcasts and you've covered a bunch of other topics. So I'll include those in the show notes. But, you are a phenomenal Instagrammer.
Thank you.
Which is something I truly do not understand the medium at all. So hats off. If people want to follow you and stay in touch and get inspired and continue this conversation with you, where are some good places for them to go?
Yeah, the best place right now is Instagram. That's definitely the social media platform that I use the most. I will say, if you want to send me a longer message, just emailing me is best, and you can email me either through the link on Instagram, or it's just my name, Tara, middle initial F, Kemp, @gmail.com. And just because Instagram messages, they don't, if you read them, you can't like mark them as unread or like flag them or something to go back to them. They get lost. So, but basically Instagram is the best place. You can also find me on Facebook. But those are the two. That's Instagram's really the place where I'm doing most of my social media right now. For a while I was dabbling in different things. Like, I did have a couple of podcast episodes that I put out, or I did some YouTube videos, but right now I needed to focus and hone my attention in on studying. And if I do any other social media work, it's for the Mastering Diabetes team. So.
Gotcha. So I'm on. So it's just Tara Kemp _
Yes.
Is your Instagram feed. Man, I would love you to post an ugly meal one day. It would make me feel so much better about myself. But that's just me.
That's awesome. Yeah. So if you watch my stories, sometimes I show like what I do with, after I take the pretty Instagram photo, then I show like the post photo mashup of just like everything mashed together in a big salad bowl.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tara, thank you so much. You've been very, very generous with your time. I don't know if you're procrastinating some study or not, but I really appreciate this conversation. I'm so happy that we actually spent a lot more time than I usually spend with guests on kind of the dark part of the journey. I usually like to kind of like just highlight that and then get to all the good stuff. It feels really important that we spent almost an hour talking about the struggles and the journey and the learnings, partly because I think they're going to be, even with your RD MPH, they're going to be your greatest resources, and also not to tempt a recovering people pleaser, but I can totally see you starting a plant-based RD program, like in 15 years, so that other people don't have to go through what you went through, and so that you've really changed the industry from the inside. So I know you're going to have a huge impact, make a huge splash, and I want to be able to say, you know what? Before everybody knew who Tara was, she was on my podcast.
Oh my gosh! Well, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to me to have the support, and as much as I've learned to have the self-validation, the external validation still always feels great. So,
Right.
so thank you so much. And I did enjoy the conversation. And, I still do sometimes feel that little, pinch of fear as I'm starting to talk about everything that I went through. But it is always really reassuring when people connect with it, and, to know that there are people who listen to this type of thing and say, me too, and know that it resonates with them and that it can help them in some way. So for those reasons, I feel that it is important to share.
Right. I never had anyone come up to me when I was being fake and saying, oh, good, somebody else who has no problems. I can really identify with you.
That's such a good point.
All right, Tara, thank you again. And, we'll keep in touch. I want to find out, when you end up starting school, what other initiatives you get involved in, because you are a bright light in the plant-based firmament, and we're all better off for having you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I feel the same way about you, Howard. The work that you've done to not only, on your own, but also you've just done so much work to help push forward so many other people in this movement. I mean, the work that you did with Dr. Campbell and Garth Davis and now Josh Lajani. I mean, you're such a rock star, and the way that you use your skills to help lift others up is so beautiful, inspiring, and I just want to honor you in that as well.
Oh, thank you. I too love external validation.
It does feel great.
Yeah, I'm going to just cuddle that comment for a little while before I go to lunch.
Perfect.
All right. Take care, Tara. Thanks again.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Plant Yourself podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. More than anything else, those reviews help us reach more listeners and spread the message. And for information about the Big Change Program starting in September, visit bigchangeprogram.com. And be sure to check out the show notes for today's episode with links to everything we talked about at plantyourself.com/222. If you're new to the show, you can catch up on 221 archived episodes over at plantyourself.com. And if you get the podcast but you don't get my weekly-ish newsletter, The Big Change Bulldog, you can sign up for that. And also get the Stop Self-Sabotage report at plantyourself.com/sabotage. Okay, here's the part of the show where I express my gratitude and make a fool of myself at the same time. Thanks to Plant Yourself podcast patrons Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Mara, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Kanofsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Julianne Rowland, Stu Dolnick, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gila Lacert, David Donahue, Blair Seibert, Dorona Vizov, Rhymes with Keep the Cheesov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergner, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmed, Molly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R., Susan Lafferty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Rhymes with Furry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corcoran, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabine Kurtzals, and Nigel Davies for your generous support of the podcast. And of course, thanks to Will Ridenauer. Every week, I thank Will Ridenauer for writing this beautiful song, Sabali Dan, The Dance of Peace. Check out willridenauer.com for more of his beautiful Kora music. If you'd like to support this show, you can share this and other episodes on social media, via email. You can write that iTunes review, and you can become a patron of the show with an ongoing contribution over at plantyourself.com. And if you do, you get access to my Healthy Habit Huddles 3 times a month. I come and talk at you. I offer you guidance on incorporating healthy habits into your own life. In garden news, we got our first 4 okra last night. Threw them into a stew. It wasn't particularly tasty because I forgot to throw in any condiments, but still nothing that can't be fixed with healthy dollops of sriracha, Dijon mustard, and nutritional yeast. In running news, a long weekend of running, and I'm still tired. So today is Tuesday. I'm taking it easy. I'll probably go for a run in the afternoon, but I did not wake myself up this morning. We'll see how that goes. Oh, and before I let you go, a couple of podcast reviews came in this week, and I just love them. One of those is titled Give Just a Little by C. Painter. who says, I just became a patron after hearing Howard break down the numbers on his time and money spent giving us A-plus content. I just had to give and not just take. Oh, thank you so much, not only for giving, but also for leaving that review. So hopefully it will inspire others. And then Francis Poseidon says, incredible. I love this podcast so much. Howard is so personable and has such great rapport with his guests. He picks really fascinating people to talk to. I have learned so much about plants, sustainability, nutrition, and lifestyle from this podcast. I recommend it to anyone looking into getting healthier. Oh, thank you so much, Francis Poseidon. It occurs to me I should have other people read these. I'm starting to blush a little bit here. Anyway, thank you all. Thanks everyone who has become a patron. Thank you everyone who has volunteered to transcribe episodes, for everyone who's shared a review, who has shared this podcast, and who has gone and done something with anything that you've heard here, who made a change in your own life and rippled it outward. My gratitude is overflowing. So that's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.